I'm a pharmacist with a medical degree who removes people. I've never been caught. I always knew something inside me was hollow. A space where feelings were supposed to be was just quiet. I learned to fake it. A smile for a customer, a concerned nod for a patient, a laugh at a coworker's joke. It was all a performance, a mask I wore so well I sometimes forgot it was there. People see the white coat and they see a healer. They don't know that my first white coat, the longer one, hangs in the back of my closet, a relic from a medical school degree I never used. I could have been a doctor. I wanted to be one, once. I thought the intricate puzzle of the human body was a worthy challenge. I endured the endless nights, the grueling exams, the anatomy labs where the dead taught me their silent, fragile secrets. I learned the human body as a complex, beautiful machine. But then came the clinical rotations, the part where you deal with the actual people inside the machines. And I saw the job for what it truly was, messy, emotional, and disappointingly chaotic. I remember one case in the ER. A drunk driver, a man who had wrapped his car around a pole, was screaming obscenities at the nurses while a few bays over, the family he had T-boned were being told their child wasn't going to make it. I was supposed to feel sympathy for the family, anger at the driver. I felt nothing. Just a cold analytical curiosity about the physics of the impact, the cascade of organ failure. The emotions of it all felt like static. An unnecessary variable in a complex equation. I realized then I didn't want to fix the machines. I didn't want to hold hands, deliver bad news, or fight a losing battle against their self-destructive choices. I wanted a quieter, more detached vantage point. I chose the pharmacy. It's cleaner here. I'm the gatekeeper, not the supplicant at the bedside. I see the patterns, the prescriptions for depression that follow a diagnosis of a spouse's chronic illness, the pain medications for injuries that never seem to heal. I have all the knowledge, all the access, but none of the messy human connection. It's the perfect observation deck from which to view the rot. The desire was always there, a low hum beneath the surface. It's a clinical thing, really. A textbook definition. It is a compulsion. A cold internal pressure that builds and builds, demanding release. For a long time it just idled, a predator waiting for permission to hunt. Then about 8 years ago I was flipping through channels and landed on a show. A man with a friendly face, a steady job, and a secret life. A man who also had a dark, driving force and channeled it with a code. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a broken thing. I felt seen. The show gave me a framework. A purpose. That was 8 years ago. This morning, I read a local news blotter about a community leader who has been missing for a week, with police baffled. I'm not baffled. I know the precise physiological cascade that stopped his heart. I know exactly what he's been reduced to. And the compulsion is finally quiet. So here I am on whatever this dark corner of the internet calls itself. I'm not looking for advice, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm here to tell you my story, to put it down somewhere someone might understand. I'm here to brag, because I am very, very good at what I do. And the secret, the beautiful, simple secret to getting away with it all? No one is looking for the people I take. No one really cares when a piece of human garbage goes missing. Project 1, The Brute. My first was a man I'll call Mr. A. He was a regular at the pharmacy. A big beefy guy with a booming laugh and hands like ham hocks that looked like they could crush stone. He always had a folksy charm for me, asking about my day. But his wife, a tiny bird-like woman I'll call Mrs. A, told a different story without ever saying a word. She'd come in for his prescriptions, never for herself. She never made eye contact, her gaze always fixed on the worn linoleum floor. She always wore long sleeves, even in the dead of summer. The first time I noticed, it was a faint yellowing bruise on her wrist as her sleeve slid back when she reached for a bag. A few weeks later, it was the unmistakable shape of fingerprints on her upper arm, a darker purple this time. The compulsion, that quiet thing inside me, began to stir. It recognized a target. But the code I was developing for myself demanded certainty. My medical training demanded a differential diagnosis of his character, and my new calling demanded proof. I began to watch them more closely. I started accidentally, calling Mrs. A to clarify a dosage instruction, just to hear the background noise of her home. One time, I kept her on the line, my voice dripping with professional concern, and I could hear him. A low guttural roar, like an animal, followed by the sharp crack of something hitting a wall. I heard a small whimper from her before she quickly made an excuse and hung up. The next step was physical observation. I found their house, a small, sad-looking bungalow in a neighborhood of identical houses. I took up running in the evenings, a tedious but necessary chore. My route, of course, conveniently took me past their street. Through their large picture window, I saw the story play out in silhouette. I saw him, his face red, gesturing wildly. I saw her cowering, making herself smaller and smaller. The final piece of proof, the one that signed his death warrant, came a week later. She came into the pharmacy late, just before closing, a ghost in the fluorescent lights. She needed a specific over-the-counter product, one used to prevent pregnancy after the fact. She paid in cash, her hands trembling so badly she dropped the bills on the counter. She wouldn't look at me, But I saw the tears welling in her eyes, and a fresh split in her lower lip she kept trying to hide. It wasn't just beatings. It was a complete, systemic violation of her existence. The code was satisfied. The compulsion was running at full throttle. The plan had to be clean. Clinical. My advantage wasn't just chemistry, it was a deep understanding of pathophysiology. Mr. A was on common heart medication. A massive sudden spike of a certain electrolyte in his system would induce hyperkalemia, causing a fatal cardiac arrhythmia. I could picture the EKG in my head. The flattened P wave, the widened QRS complex, the eventual sine wave pattern before a systole. To any paramedic or ER doctor, it would look like a massive natural heart attack in a man of his age and lifestyle. Untraceable. I acquired a large quantity of the necessary chemical salt. I ground it into a fine, dissolvable powder. The riskiest part was access. I watched his routine for another week. He got home from his construction job at 5:30 p.m. every day. Drank 3 beers on the porch, like clockwork. His wife was usually at her sister's on Thursday evenings. A book club, she'd once whispered. A transparent excuse for a few hours of peace. That Thursday, I parked a few streets away, dressed in a generic delivery driver uniform. It's a cloak of invisibility. The side door to the garage was old, the lock a joke. I was inside in seconds. The air was thick with the smell of sawdust and stale beer. My heart was calm, a steady metronomic beat. The compulsion was in control. In the kitchen, I found his bottle of whiskey. I uncapped it, poured in the powder and swirled it gently. It dissolved, leaving the amber liquid just a little cloudy, but after 3 beers, his palate would be shot. He'd never notice. I slipped out as silently as I came in. I went home, showered, and made myself dinner while watching a documentary on deep-sea predators. Hours later, I saw the flash of ambulance lights reflecting off my bedroom window. The obituary described a sudden and tragic heart attack. A beloved husband, a pillar of his small community, taken too soon. I attended the funeral, standing at the back, a concerned pharmacist paying his respects. His drinking buddies cried into their handkerchiefs, lamenting the loss of a great guy. But I watched Mrs. A. She wasn't happy, not in any conventional sense. She was, still. The constant tension in her shoulders was gone. She looked unburdened. For the first time, she wore a short-sleeved dress. Her arms were pale and thin, marked with the faint ghosts of old bruises, but they were bare in the sunshine. That was my trophy. Not a slide of blood, but the sight of a woman's bare arms, free from the need to hide. I had removed a cancer, and the world just kept spinning. The compulsion was quiet, sated. But I knew it wouldn't last. Project 2, the ghoul. The quiet lasted for about 9 months. Then the pressure began to build again, a low-frequency hum in the back of my skull. The compulsion needed a new project. This one found me at my counter. A man we'll call Mr. W. Greasy hair, fidgety hands that always seemed damp, and eyes that never quite settled on you. They darted around, lingering too long on the children who came in with their mothers for antibiotics. He had a recurring prescription for a mild anti-anxiety medication and always made creepy off-color jokes that no one ever laughed at. My suspicion began professionally. He came in trying to get an early refill on his benzodiazepines. When I refused, citing policy and clinical best practice, he became agitated, his voice a high-pitched whine. He claimed he'd lost the bottle. Classic diversion behavior. I logged the refusal and should have thought nothing more of it. But then I saw him in the park a few days later. He was sitting on a bench near the playground, not watching his own kids. He had none, just watching. He had a bag of candy next to him, and he wasn't eating it. The compulsion buzzed. The hunt began. This was a different kind of prey. Not a creature of brute force, but of insidious stealth. I went digital. From his patient file, I had his basic information. It's sickeningly easy to find out about someone with that. A few cheap searches on those gray market data broker websites gave me his email addresses, his known associates, his entire online footprint. He was sloppy. He used the same username for everything. Something generic like Voidwalker X7. I found him on gaming forums, on local news comment sections, and finally, on a photo sharing site. His profile was public. Mostly pictures of his apartment, his car. But his likes and the accounts he followed led to a digital sewer. A network of profiles sharing and trading illicit images of children. Some were coded, using hashtags I had to cross-reference on other, darker forums. Others were blatant. The proof was absolute. A digital mountain of filth. The code was screaming for action. His death had to be an erasure. I knew from his file that he was a severe asthmatic. He also had that anxiety, that paranoia. My plan formed around his weaknesses. Fear and air. I created a fake online persona of a young girl. It was nauseating. Every typed word a contamination. I studied the slang, the emojis, the feigned innocence. I joined the forums he frequented and initiated contact. The way he responded, the things he said. It solidified my resolve into something harder than steel. We arranged to meet in a secluded spot in the woods behind his apartment complex. He was giddy, sloppy in his excitement. The night of our meeting, I was there an hour early. I brought a canister of an industrial inert gas. Odorless, colorless. It displaces oxygen. The victim feels euphoric, then passes out. Hypoxic death. It's silent and leaves no metabolic trace. A clean, clinical solution. I hid in the dense underbrush. He arrived, clutching a plastic bag, the candy. He looked around, his paranoia warring with his disgusting anticipation. He called out the fake name. I waited. He stepped deeper into the woods. That's when I moved. I am not a large man, but he was soft and unfit. I came up behind him, a hand over his mouth. I dragged him to a prepared spot. I tied him up. He was whimpering. I didn't say a word. I laid him on a tarp. His asthma was already kicking in from the fear and struggle. He was gasping, looking at me, begging. I placed the breathing mask attached to the canister over his mouth and nose. He thrashed weakly. I opened the valve. His body bucked, then went slack. It was over. Now for the erasure. I had brought several large containers of industrial-grade corrosives, lye and acid, the classic cocktail. With my chemistry and medical knowledge, I knew the right ratio to maximize the dissolution of organic tissue, turning solid into liquid. I placed his body in a large, reinforced plastic drum and added the chemicals. The reaction was violent, a steaming, hissing brew. I left it hidden, returning over the next few nights in a hazmat suit to stir the gruesome slurry with a long pole, ensuring complete dissolution. By the end of the week, there was nothing left but a dark, viscous liquid, which I diluted and disposed of in a storm drain over several trips. The drum was cut up and discarded in different dumpsters across 3 counties. His phone I microwaved, crushed and scattered along a highway. He was gone. The police put out a bulletin. He was a loner. The investigation went cold before it ever got warm. The compulsion was quiet again. Project 3, The Prince, the next project was different. It was an offense against my sense of order. Her name was Miss C, a college kid, full of that specific bright energy. I watched her slow decline through the prescriptions she filled at my pharmacy. First, antibiotics for a UTI. Then a few weeks later, another course, then antidepressants. Then sleeping pills that she requested with haunted eyes. I saw the light in her dim over the course of a year. Her tormentor was Mr. B, campus royalty. Star athlete, wealthy family, a smile that could charm a snake. He was also a patient. He came in for athletic tape, for protein powder, oozing confidence and privilege. I knew they were dating from the local gossip. Then, one day, Miss C came in with her mother. I heard the story in hushed, angry whispers across the counter. Assault, no charges filed. Insufficient evidence. His family's lawyers had stonewalled everything. A settlement, an NDA. Miss C dropped out of school. Mr. B was suspended for a semester but was already back on the field, celebrated as a hero. The injustice was a sickness. The system hadn't just failed, it had actively protected him. My system would correct the error. His death had to be a message. He worked out at a high-end 24-hour gym. I got a job as a night shift cleaner. For 3 weeks, I was a ghost mopping floors, studying camera blind spots, learning the staff routines. I saw Mr. B several times. He never even looked at me. I was part of the furniture. I acquired a potent inhalation anesthetic from the pharmacy. A bottle gets damaged in transit, a log entry gets miscopied. Plausible deniability. The night I chose, the gym was dead. I created a 15-minute gap in the security recording by tripping a specific breaker in a janitorial closet. He was on the bench press, pushing his final rep. I was on him before he even knew I was there. The anesthetic soaked cloth over his mouth and nose. He struggled, his powerful body lurching, but he was exhausted and the sevoflurane was fast. He was unconscious in 30 seconds. I dragged him to the men's locker room, a camera blind spot. The compulsion was singing. I stripped him, the hero, now just a piece of meat. I took a heavy pipe. With my knowledge of anatomy, I didn't just break his throwing arm. I shattered the humerus with a spiral fracture, dislocated the glenohumeral joint, and used the jagged edge of the pipe to tear the rotator cuff. A career-ending, life-altering injury. I did the same to his legs, ruining the ligaments in his knees. He would never play again. He would never walk right again. He started to stir as the anesthetic wore off, his groans turning to whimpers of agony. His eyes fluttered open. They focused on me, the anonymous janitor. "Why?" he croaked. I leaned in close, my voice a dead flat whisper. "For Miss C." The dawning comprehension in his eyes was the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed. The color drained from his face as his privileged world crashed down around him. I didn't let him scream. I used a simple garrote to finish the job. The cleanup was meticulous. I used the locker room's own showers to wash away any trace evidence. His body was wrapped in industrial plastic sheeting, put into a large laundry cart, and wheeled out an emergency exit to my waiting van. His body was disposed of by the ravenous hunger of pigs on a rural farm. It's a cliché for a reason. The media explosion was glorious. Campus hero vanishes. His wealthy family offered a massive reward. He became a ghost, his golden legacy overwritten by a dark, brutal mystery. Project 4, The Preacher. After the visceral satisfaction of Project 3, the compulsion quieted, but it also changed. It grew more ambitious. It wasn't just about punishing simple brutes or ghouls, it was about dismantling systems of decay. The next target wasn't a criminal in the legal sense, but a predator of the soul. I call him Mr. P. His church was the Church of the Abundant Dawn, a storefront television ministry that preyed on the elderly and the desperate. His face was everywhere on late-night TV, on billboards promising deliverance from debt and disease. He had perfect teeth, compassionate eyes, and a voice that could soothe a crying baby. He was also a grade A parasite. I saw his victims every week at the pharmacy. Elderly women with shaking hands, telling me they could no longer afford their heart medication or insulin because they had sown a seed of faith with Mr. P. They would choose his empty promises over their own survival. He wasn't just taking their money. He was killing them on an installment plan. The code demanded I witness his evil firsthand. Infiltrating his organization was the only way. I couldn't go as myself. I created a new identity. A recently widowed, wealthy investor who was spiritually adrift. I bought expensive suits, a luxury car, and practiced a backstory of loss and existential dread. I made a large public donation at one of his services. It was like chum in the water. Within a week, I was invited to a private fellowship dinner with the pastor himself. The man was even more repellent up close. He oozed a sick, synthetic sincerity. He spoke of miracles while wearing a watch that cost more than my car. He quoted scripture while his eyes appraised my suit, my shoes, my potential for further donations. I spent a month inside his cult. I attended services, volunteered, and made myself indispensable through my fictional financial acumen. I saw the inner workings, the cold calling rooms where volunteers pressured seniors to turn over their pensions. The anointed water that was just tap water in fancy bottles sold at a 10,000% markup. The psychological manipulation used to isolate followers from their families. The proof was overwhelming. The compulsion was a coiled snake, ready to strike. His death had to be a mockery of his life's work. He promised miracles. I would give him one. He promised salvation. I would give him an unforgettable damnation. Mr. P held special healing and baptism services in a rented hall. The centerpiece was a large portable baptismal font. I knew from my time inside that he used a special blend of oils in the water, something he claimed was blessed. This was my opening. I volunteered to help prepare the hall for the next service. Citing my grief and need to serve, I offered to anoint the baptismal waters myself. They readily agreed. The night before the service, I had the hall to myself. My tool was chemistry, but of a different sort. I introduced two key substances into the water. The first was a powerful, water-soluble hallucinogen, a derivative of psilocybin I'd synthesized, which would be absorbed through the skin. The second was a chemical that, when it came into contact with the specific oils he used, would have a mild corrosive effect, causing a burning sensation and redness on the skin. The final piece was for him alone. I treated the towel he would use to dry his face with a liquid containing a potent, fast-acting cardiac stimulant, absorbed through the mucous membranes of his eyes and nose. It wouldn't kill him on its own, but combined with the stress and the hallucinogen, it would put unbearable strain on his heart. I attended the service, sitting in the front row. The spectacle was everything I'd hoped for. One by one, followers were immersed in the font. As they came up, they looked dazed, confused. Some began weeping, claiming they saw angels. Others screamed, clutching at their skin, which was turning red and irritated. They thought it was the Holy Spirit burning away their sins. The crowd was in a frenzy of religious hysteria. Then came the grand finale. Mr. P, his eyes shining with triumph at this miracle, decided to fully immerse himself to show his devotion. He went under. When he came up sputtering, the hallucinogen hit him hard. His eyes went wide with genuine terror. He began screaming about seeing demons, clawing at his own burning skin. He stumbled out of the font, a raving, terrified madman in front of his entire congregation. He reached for his personal towel, buried his face in it, and inhaled the stimulant. His eyes rolled back in his head. He clutched his chest, a look of pure agony on his face. He collapsed on the stage, twitching, his heart giving out under the chemical and psychological assault. The aftermath was chaos. His followers saw their savior struck down by a divine, terrifying power. The official cause of death was a massive heart attack. The stories of visions and burning skin were dismissed as mass hysteria. The Church of the Abundant Dawn crumbled within months, beset by internal power struggles and the sheer terror of what they had witnessed. I had not only killed the man, I had destroyed his legacy with a twisted manufactured miracle. The compulsion was sated, humming with the clean satisfaction of a perfectly executed project. Project 5, the pillar of the community. After the preacher, the compulsion was quiet for a long time. The scale of the last project had been deeply satisfying. But the pressure always returns. This time, the target was more subtle. He was a city councilman, a man I'll call Mr. T. He had a silver-haired grandfatherly image. He sponsored youth leagues, cut ribbons at charity events, and his face was on benches all over town. He was also a patient at my pharmacy, picking up medication for a mild heart condition. The thread I pulled began with a different set of patients. A cluster of families from a low-income housing project on the west side of town. Over 2 years, I noticed a pattern. An uptick in prescriptions for powerful inhalers for children. An increase in diagnoses of rare cancers in adults who were otherwise healthy. My medical training saw a statistical anomaly. The compulsion saw a symptom of a deeper disease. I started digging. The housing project was built on reclaimed industrial land. The original permits had stipulated extensive soil remediation. I spent weeks in the city archives, poring over microfiche, and then went online, digging into LLCs and shell corporations. Mr. T had been the chairman of the zoning committee that approved the project. And the construction company that won the bid, the one that had certified the soil remediation, was owned by his brother-in-law. They had cut corners, buried tons of toxic waste, and built homes on top of it. Mr. T had gotten a massive undeclared kickback, funneled through a series of shell companies. He had poisoned children for a new summer home. This man couldn't just disappear. His death had to be a statement. He was high profile. I couldn't get to him at his home. It was gated and alarmed. But Mr. T had a weakness. A carefully managed secret. He had a mistress, a young aide, and a private apartment he kept for their trysts. I broke into the apartment once, when they were both out of town. It was a simple lock. I didn't take anything. I just planted a tiny voice-activated audio recorder and a pinhole camera in a smoke detector. I listened for weeks. To their lovemaking, their banal conversations. And then, I heard what I needed. He was paranoid about his heart condition. His mistress often joked about his collection of pills. The plan was elegant. It would be a suicide. A man who knew his corruption was about to be exposed. I created a detailed dossier of his crimes, the land deal, the bank statements, the shell corporations. I printed it all, put it in a manila envelope, then I prepared my chemical tools. I used my knowledge to synthesize a fast-acting neurotoxin derived from a common pesticide. It was subtle. Ingested, it would cause rapid paralysis of the respiratory system, mimicking a massive coronary event, especially in a man with his history. Crucially, it would degrade and become undetectable in the bloodstream within 12 hours. The final piece was a powerful sedative I could aerosolize. I returned to the love nest one last time. I rigged a simple device to the air conditioning unit, set to go off on a timer. The next time they were there, I waited across the street. I activated the device. Within 20 minutes, the lights were still on, but there was no movement. I picked the lock and entered. They were both unconscious in the bed. The sedative was a kindness for the girl. She was a victim in her own way. I administered the neurotoxin to Mr. T via a tiny injection in his thigh, a spot that would be missed in a cursory exam. Then, I set the scene. I typed a short suicide note on his laptop, admitting to everything, citing the pressure and the guilt. I placed the dossier on the table next to the bed. I put the vial that had contained the toxin in his hand, making it look like he drank it. I turned up the heat to accelerate the toxin's degradation. I took the girl's car keys, drove her car a mile away and left her in it, slumped over the wheel. She would wake up with a headache and a gap in her memory, a drunk night she couldn't explain. I left the apartment and anonymously mailed copies of the dossier to every major news outlet in the state and to the DA's office. By the time Mr. T's body was discovered 2 days later, the story of his corruption was already breaking. His death was ruled a suicide. A coward's way out. His legacy was not of charity and public service, but of greed and poison. His name was Mud. And in a small pharmacy on the other side of town, I started dispensing the first of what I knew would be many fewer inhalers to the children on the west side. Project 6, The Slumlord. My sixth project was an escalation in scale. It was about the man I'll call Mr. L. He owned the building my pharmacy was in, and half a dozen other low-rent properties. I saw the girls. Young, terrified, mostly from Eastern Europe or Central America. They lived in the apartments above my shop, ghosts in their own lives. They never stayed long. A new group every few months. They were always escorted by a couple of brutish-looking men who worked for him. It was a human trafficking operation, happening right under my nose. The police were either blind or bought. Killing him wasn't enough. I needed to burn down the entire nest. For months, I became an expert on his operation. I planted listening devices during late-night maintenance sweeps. I put GPS trackers on the vans his thugs used. I hacked his Wi-Fi network. It took me 2 months and a lot of trial and error with decryption software, but I finally cracked the encrypted ledger on his laptop. It was all there. Names, dates, payments, connections to other bigger players. The Rosetta Stone of his filthy empire. My plan had 2 phases. Phase 1, liberation. I sent the ledger anonymously to an NGO that specializes in rescuing trafficking victims. I gave them everything. I watched from a distance as they got the girls out. Clean and silent. Phase 2, annihilation. Now he was just a furious, exposed man who had lost his product. His hub was a warehouse by the docks. I knew he and his remaining thugs were holed up there, panicking. This time, my tool was fire. I built a custom incendiary device using specialized chemicals. A chemical trigger that would create an intense magnesium fire, hot enough to melt steel. On a stormy night, I got into the warehouse through a drainage culvert. It was disgusting work, wading through muck and filth. But it got me inside. I planted the device near the main structural supports in the center of the building and set it on a 2-hour chemical timer. I was miles away when it went off. The news reports called it a massive gas explosion. The fire burned for 2 days. By the time they could get investigators in, there was nothing left but a charred, melted ruin. They found fragments of bone, but they were so damaged they couldn't be properly identified. Mr. L and his crew were officially listed as missing, presumed dead. His empire crumbled to dust. Project 7, The Ghost. My most recent project was the most difficult. It was a man the media had nicknamed the Ghost. 5 years ago, a man named Mr. M had been the sole survivor of a house fire that claimed his wife and 2 young children. The prosecution argued he had set the fire to collect a massive life insurance policy. The evidence was strong, but circumstantial. His lawyer was brilliant, and a key piece of forensic evidence was thrown out on a technicality. He walked free. He took the insurance money and vanished, becoming a cautionary tale, a boogeyman. But I found him. It took me almost a year. He was living under a new name in a small, isolated town 100 miles away. He had bought a small cabin deep in the woods, protected by fences, cameras, and a profound, well-earned paranoia. The compulsion was a cold hard diamond in my chest. This was not about correcting a societal ill. This was about vengeance. This was about balancing a scale that had been tipped over with blood and ash. Getting to him was a siege. I spent months observing him from a distance with high-powered binoculars, learning his routines. He rarely left. A weekly trip into town for supplies, always in daylight, always watching his back. His cabin was a fortress. This couldn't be a quiet chemical death. The code demanded poetry. He used fire, so fire it would be. I had to get inside. My chance came during a massive thunderstorm that knocked out power to the whole region. I knew his security system had a battery backup, but it would only last a few hours. I waited for the 3rd hour in the pouring rain and darkness and cut his phone line. Then I approached the house. I didn't break in. I used a tool of his own making. Fear. I created a series of diversions around the property. A snapped twig here, a rock thrown against a far window there, making him think someone was trying to get in, but from the front. As he moved through the house, checking the windows, I slipped in through a back door I had previously identified as his weak point. I was inside his home. The air was stale, the home of a man hiding from the world. I hid in a closet and waited. I waited for hours as he calmed down, convincing himself it was just the storm. When he finally went to sleep, I went to work. I moved silently through the house, locking all the doors and windows from the inside with secondary deadbolts I had brought. I disabled the smoke detectors. Then, I took out the 2 small canisters I had carried in my pack. Each contained a chemical that was harmless on its own, but when mixed, would create a rapidly spreading, intensely hot and nearly smokeless fire. A little something I'd learned from my advanced chemistry electives. I set my traps in the 2 main exits, the front and back doors. Then I went to his bedroom door. I poured a line of gasoline under it and lit it. The effect was instantaneous. The roar of the fire woke him. He screamed, a terrified animal sound. He ran from the bedroom, choking on the smoke, and found his way to the living room. He saw me then, standing there in the flickering light, dressed in black, my face covered. He didn't ask why. He knew. In my hand I held up a small, slightly burnt photograph. It was of his family, one I had recovered from the public case file. He lunged for the front door, clawing at the locks I had set. The fire was growing, the heat becoming immense. He turned to the back door, with the same result. The chemical accelerants I'd placed there ignited. The room became an inferno. He was trapped between 2 walls of fire. I didn't stay to watch him burn. I had my own escape route planned, a small window in the pantry at the back of the house, which I had unlocked. I slipped out into the storm as the cabin became a funeral pyre. His death was ruled an accident. A recluse, a tragic figure, finally undone by a stray lightning strike or a faulty wire. They never found the secondary locks, as they melted in the blaze. They never knew he was a prisoner in his own burning tomb. They called it a sad end to a tragic story. I called it a long overdue cremation. Project 8, The Professional. For the first time, my work brought me into direct conflict with a creature like myself. Not a monster hiding behind a mask of civility, but an overt predator. This project was not planned, it was a matter of survival. It began as a loose end from Mr. L's operation. A few months after the warehouse fire, I noticed I was being watched. It was subtle. A car that appeared too often in my rearview mirror, a man reading a newspaper across the street from the pharmacy who never turned a page. Amateurs would have missed it. I did not. My paranoia, a tool I keep as sharp as any scalpel, went into overdrive. I swept my apartment for bugs, my car for trackers. I found both. A tiny microphone in a power outlet and a GPS tracker tucked up under my rear bumper. They were professional grade. This was not the police. This was someone who knew the warehouse fire was not an accident. The compulsion shifted from a predatory hunger to a cold, razor-sharp focus on self-preservation. The hunter was being hunted. I had to identify him. I let the bugs remain and began a campaign of misinformation. I made fake phone calls about a large, and entirely fictional, gambling debt. I created a false trail leading to a known crime syndicate, making it seem like I was a small fish caught in their net. Meanwhile, I dedicated myself to finding my shadow. Using public CCTV and my own observations, I got a partial plate number, a grainy image. I ran it through the same gray market data brokers I'd used before. It took weeks, but I got a name. Let's call him Mr. S. Ex-military, dishonorably discharged. Now a freelance contractor for hire. A hitman. He was patient, methodical, and dangerous. He was a professional. This was a different game. My previous targets were sheep. This was a wolf. I couldn't use a simple chemical trick. I had to build a better trap. I decided to use the false trail I'd created. I set up a fake payment for my fictional gambling debt. The instructions, which I spoke aloud in my bugged apartment, were for me to drop a bag of cash at a specific locker in a downtown bus station. Mr. S would expect me to be there. He would be there to intercept me. But I wasn't going to be there. I was going to be watching. The trap was in the locker itself. The locker had a false back I'd installed the night before. Behind it was a spring-loaded syringe. The locking mechanism of the locker was rigged. When the key was turned, it wouldn't just open the door. It would complete an electrical circuit, firing the syringe through the false back into the arm of whoever was reaching inside. The drug cocktail in the syringe was my masterpiece. It wasn't immediately fatal. It was a combination of a powerful paralytic, rocuronium, and a dissociative anesthetic, ketamine. The target would be conscious but completely paralyzed, unable to move or speak, while experiencing a terrifying detached trip. He would be helpless. I watched from a cafe across the street, using binoculars. Mr. S was good. He didn't approach the locker directly. He waited, watched. After an hour, when I didn't show, he made his move. He approached the locker, using a set of professional lockpicks. As he worked the lock, I saw him tense. He must have felt the slight difference in the mechanism. But his greed or professionalism pushed him forward. He got it open. He reached inside for the bait, a bag filled with shredded paper. I saw his arm jerk back. A tiny red dot appeared on his sleeve. His eyes went wide with confusion, then panic. He tried to stand but his legs buckled. He collapsed to the floor, his body rigid, his eyes darting around in abject terror. To the few people in the station, it looked like a seizure or a stroke. Someone called an ambulance. This was my moment. I walked calmly across the street, my pharmacist's coat on, a medical bag in my hand. "I'm a doctor," I announced, pushing through the small crowd. "Let me see." They parted for me. I knelt beside Mr. S. His eyes, the only part of him that could move, were screaming. He knew who I was. I did a mock assessment. "Looks like a severe paralytic event," I said gravely to the onlookers. When the paramedics arrived, I gave them a quick, professional rundown, suggesting a specific, and entirely incorrect course of treatment that would do nothing to counteract the drugs. I was the helpful professional, the concerned citizen. Mr. S was taken to the hospital, a living man in a dead body. The drugs would wear off in a few hours, but his career was over. His face was known. His failure was absolute. He would be a John Doe with a wild, unbelievable story no one would believe. He was a ghost, and I had exorcised him. The compulsion was not just sated, it was validated. I had faced a mirror of myself and proven that my intellect, my clinical approach, was superior to his brute force. Project 9, The Mentor. The final project I will share with you is the one that brought my journey full circle. It was the most personal, the most satisfying, and the one that solidified the righteousness of my path. The target was a man I once admired. Dr. F, he had been my pharmacology professor in medical school. He was brilliant, a master of neurochemistry, the man who first showed me the elegant dance of molecules in the human brain. But Dr. F had fallen. After leaving academia, he opened a private pain management clinic. In reality, it was a pill mill. He was a legal drug pusher, preying on the addicted and the desperate, handing out prescriptions for high-powered opioids like they were candy in exchange for exorbitant cash payments. I saw his work every day. The gaunt faces, the trembling hands, the forged prescription pads. He was using the knowledge he had taught me to create an army of zombies, and he was getting rich doing it. He was a perversion of everything medicine was supposed to be. He was a betrayal of me. The compulsion was a cold, righteous fury. This was not just a project, this was a reckoning. The hunt was an intellectual exercise. I knew his methods. I knew the loopholes he exploited. Using my pharmacy's database, I cross-referenced his patients, building a damning profile of his operation. I gathered evidence not for the police, but for my own code. Getting to him was the challenge. His clinic was a fortress, protected by desperate addicts who acted as his security. But I had an advantage he could never anticipate. I was one of his former students. I scheduled an appointment under a false name, complaining of chronic back pain. I walked into his clinic and saw the decay. The waiting room was filled with human misery. When I was finally called back, I came face to face with him. He was older, softer, his eyes holding a greedy, deadened look I didn't recognize. He didn't remember me. I was just another wallet. He gave me a cursory exam and wrote me a prescription for a month's supply of oxycodone without a second thought. I had my proof. My plan for him was poetic. He would be the subject of his own clinical trial. I synthesized a unique drug, a custom-designed opioid agonist. It was thousands of times more potent than fentanyl, something utterly new. It would be my signature on his soul. But first, he would experience the suffering he inflicted. I broke into his clinic late one night. I bypassed his cheap alarm system and waited for him in his office. When he came in the next morning, I was sitting in his chair. The shock on his face was exquisite. Before he could scream, I used a taser to incapacitate him. I strapped him to one of his own examination tables. When he awoke, I began the procedure. I administered a drug that would induce a rapid, agonizing withdrawal from the opioids his body was accustomed to. He went through hell. The sweating, the vomiting, the muscle spasms, the sheer terror. I monitored his vitals with clinical detachment, keeping him alive, making sure he experienced every second of it. "This is what you do to people, Dr. F," I said, my voice calm. "This is the pain management you provide." He wept and begged. He promised me money, anything. I felt nothing. After hours of this, when he was a shattered, broken wreck, I prepared the final dose. My custom synthesized opioid. I filled a syringe with the clear liquid. "You taught me so much, doctor," I said, holding the syringe up to the light. "You taught me how a single molecule can bring a man to his knees. Let this be your final lesson." I administered the injection. His suffering ended almost instantly. A brief euphoric sigh escaped his lips, and then his respiratory system simply ceased to function. A clean, perfect overdose of a drug that no coroner would ever be able to identify. I cleaned the scene meticulously. I wiped every surface, removed all evidence of my presence. I left his body strapped to the table, a monument to his own greed. They would find him the next day. The police would be baffled. An OD certainly, but of what? It would be a medical mystery. His clinic was shut down. His empire of pain was dismantled. I had not just killed him. I had presented his peers with a puzzle they could never solve. A final, arrogant testament to the fact that my knowledge, my application of our shared craft, was infinitely superior to his. And so my chronicle, for now, is complete. 9 projects. 9 pieces of human garbage removed from the world. 9 times the compulsion has been quieted. Each time, I have grown more efficient, more ambitious, my methods more refined. I am not haunted. I don't lose sleep. The only thing I feel is a sense of order, a profound and satisfying peace. The compulsion is quiet. It is fed. But I am a student of biology, a doctor of the body's intricate systems. I know that homeostasis is a temporary state. The pressure will build again. The compulsion will return. It is a fundamental part of my own physiology. I look at the world, at the news, at the endless parade of monsters hiding behind human faces. The liars, the abusers, the predators, the parasites. They are a disease, a cancer on the body of society. And the world's immune system is weak, compromised, unwilling to excise the malignancies. So I will continue my work. I will be the targeted therapy. The clinical trial of one, the final, fatal prescription. They will never look for the helpful, harmless man in the white coat, the one with the sad eyes and the wasted medical degree. They never look for the real monsters. But I do, I always do.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.